Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, and welcome to our January webinar, Top Digital Marketing Trends to Watch in 2018. Thanks everyone for your patience. We're going to wait for a few more people who are still logging in right now, but while we wait, I do have a few things to share with you. First up, we're in the middle of data collection for our popular survey, sponsored by Geonetric and eHealthcare Strategy and Trends. The 2018 Healthcare Digital Marketing Trends Survey is an opportunity for you to help build the foundation for future marketing strategies at healthcare organizations around the country. Please participate in this important research by visiting www.geonetric.com/take-survey. That's geonetric.com/take-survey. Geonetric is a marketing agency and technology partner that helps healthcare organizations generate marketing results. We offer a suite of services, including website design and development, marketing campaigns, SEO, content development, and more. We work with health systems, hospitals, and clinics around the country. Learn more by visiting our website at geonetric.com. And a reminder, coming up next month, David Sturtz will be back to discuss WordPress survival skills for the healthcare marketer. You can register for this and find all of our upcoming and on-demand webinars at geonetric.com/webinars. As usual, our webinar today will run approximately 1 hour. If you're listening on a speakerphone, we recommend you mute your line to prevent audio quality issues. We're going to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation, so please enter those in the questions box. We depend on your feedback to make our webinars the best they can be, so please take a moment to complete the survey that pops up at the end of the webinar. And finally, a recording of this presentation will be posted on geonetric.com in the ideas section. So today we have two presenters. First is Ben Dillon, Chief Strategy Officer here at Geonetric. Ben loves sharing new ideas in digital marketing, keeping a watchful eye on healthcare industry trends and seeing how it all intersects. A sought-after speaker, writer, blogger, and current SHSMD board president, Ben's an influential voice in healthcare marketing, helping organizations across the country embrace online strategies to engage health consumers. And David Sturtz, the Digital Strategy Director here at Geonetric, is passionate about connecting people with the information they need to live healthier lives. As Digital Strategy Director here at Geonetric, he's spent over a decade guiding top healthcare brands and helping them achieve their marketing goals through information architecture, search strategy, content management software, and web analytics. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Ben and David.
Thank you, Cole, and thanks to everyone for joining us today as we sit down to talk about trends for 2018. And this is a webinar that we've done for the last couple of years. This is our first webinar of the year, looking at what the year ahead is bringing, and it's always kind of a fun way to just sort of think about what challenges we may have in the year ahead and some things that we may want to focus on. So we're getting at our crystal ball and thinking about what is coming in 2018. But a good place to start in all that is to look back at what we predicted for 2017 and maybe grading ourselves a little bit on how we did. So when we did this a year ago, our first prediction was healthcare will see more uncertainty in the coming year. And I think that's certainly proven to be true. Of course, at this point, we knew that Trump had won the White House and those sorts of things. And as expected, there was much discussion and much debate over the future of our healthcare system, about Obamacare, about many of those things. And none of that's been resolved, but certainly the uncertainty has been a big factor. Now, as organizations seek to respond to this uncertainty, there were a couple of strategies, but predominant amongst them is a continued push to become larger. Now, that's organic growth, continuing to add services and continuing to expand the footprint, as well as an awful lot of merger and acquisition activity. I think we saw maybe that pace of that M&A activity starting to slow a little bit in 2017 over what we'd seen in the previous couple of years, but only in comparison to the previous couple of years. And it's really something that's grown pretty considerably. And so I think that continued to be that was a pretty accurate prediction here over 2017. We also looked at the year and saw that transparency was likely to grow. And despite that growth, there was going to be a long way to go. We'll talk more about that today. The interesting thing about trends is they're not nicely, cleanly bisected by the end of the year. And so while we've certainly seen a lot of things happen in terms of transparency in 2017, that continues to evolve and become a factor and continue to be a factor rather in 2018. But I think we've seen a lot of growth in transparency, particularly around the physician experience and sharing that data with consumers directly. In addition, we predicted that mobile was going to be a huge factor, as it's been for several years. But as much as we keep thinking maybe mobile is just going to become a normal part of things, its influence continues to steer the ship, and we certainly saw that happen in 2017 as well. Another trend that will continue into 2018 and we'll be talking a bit about today is the evolving shape of search engines. And in particular, last year we saw this goal of search engines moving to become answer engines instead of just indexes to take people to your website and other websites. This year, we're going to see some of the implications of that shift and maybe some of the things that were driving some of those changes as well. We certainly predicted digital marketing was going to grow quite a lot across industries. At the beginning of 2017, late 2016, we saw more dollars being spent in digital marketing by brands than in traditional marketing. Healthcare is a little behind in that curve, but only a little bit. So we've certainly seen digital marketing become a bigger and bigger piece of the mix. We also predicted that last year was going to be sort of a big year for storytelling. A little harder to quantify the success of that prediction, but we certainly see a lot of organizations rethinking their story, a lot of organizations spending a lot more time instead of just conveying facts, trying to engage with consumers through storytelling. And so we felt like that was pretty on the money. And then finally, the growing marketing technology stack. And while we continue to see progress here in healthcare, we may have been a little ahead of ourselves in terms of really thinking of that as a trend for 2017, or maybe it's just a trend over several years. We continue to have a long way to go, but it is something that continues to build momentum within healthcare.
So before we dive in and talk about kind of the predictions for the year ahead, we wanted to stop and take a little bit of a look at where we're at and what are some of the forces around us in the industry that are really driving the direction we're going as marketers and the things that we're looking at. And the main thing that we wanted to talk about here is health consumerism. That just has permeated really everything that we're focused on and doing in a lot of different ways. There's great stats out there about that. Including, consumer choice impacting 61% or more of all healthcare spending. So growing amount of that healthcare spending that is right in the consumer choice area, with higher deductible plans being out there and a lot of different options for consumers as far as where they go to receive care and the types of care that are available to them. Just really shifting sands as far as what options are out there for consumers and the way that we need to market as healthcare organizations to that audience. We know that consumerism drives digital. We see just in the physician space, healthcares really see that online experience as the most efficient and effective way to search for a doctor. They want to start their shopping online just like they do for many other things, being able to compare and contrast the different options. And the more they can complete that transaction online, the better. We see 77% of patients looking online even before booking that appointment. So we know that the digital is really a piece of that overall consumer experience that we're trying to create within healthcare.
And one of the ways that we respond to this push of consumerism is through greater organizational transparency. And we think of transparency really as a three-legged stool, looking at quality, looking at pricing, and looking at experience. Now, quality is something that we've been sharing for a long time, for a number of years anyway. within healthcare. So this is, there's an incredible amount of quality reporting that goes on, although a lot of that is happening not necessarily on properties that hospitals and health systems own, but on third-party sites or government websites. But there's a fair amount of information about quality that's out there. The places where we've really seen an expansion of this is in the areas of experience and to a lesser extent in pricing. Experience is really the one where we've seen big moves in the last couple of years. And a lot of that has taken the form of putting some of the CGCAP's data that we're gathering around our providers on our websites to tell a more robust, complete story about this. Now, certainly, I think we've all gotten very used to using ratings and reviews as we're doing all sorts of shopping, whether it's products on Amazon or vacations or whatever it may be. And again, as that same kind of shopping behavior is taking hold in healthcare, we're seeing a desire for those same sorts of things here, that the same kind of data availability. What we've seen, unfortunately, is most of the consumer rating sites have very, very small amounts of data about our providers, about our doctors, or about our hospitals for that matter. And so since we have a lot of data, that data is really robust, it's statistically significant, it's gathered in a really, through a robust process, it makes a lot of sense for us to share that data out there. And this is something that we've seen a lot of growth in the last year, and we'll get into some of the stats of that in a little bit here. The other component of this transparency is pricing. And to be fair, pricing transparency is something that we've heard a lot of discussion about, or had a lot of discussion about. We've really looked at how, as we try to address this push for health consumerism, how do we give consumers a better picture of what it's going to cost for them to engage with us, to get services from us, and to really look at, are we pricing things properly in their eyes, given the experience and the quality of the care that they're being given. This one, while there's been a lot of discussion, there's not been nearly as much movement out there. This is one example that we found. This is a client of ours, although this is not work that we did. Billings Clinic out in Montana does have a pretty robust out-of-pocket price estimator. So it goes through and you pick services and give information about your deductible levels and copays and things like that. And it gives you a pretty decent idea of what it's going to cost to receive a particular service from the organization. Ultimately, as we see more and more pricing information get out into the consumer domain, we'll start to see that cause a need for more strategic pricing decisions. Are we pricing what we do appropriately in order to make ourselves competitive? Today, that's a little bit hidden, maybe a lot hidden, because people don't often see the pricing until after the fact. Lots of things that make this complicated. And so there's a long way to go in terms of getting this kind of data out there. So we're hoping to see more of that happening this year. We're certainly going to see, I think, a lot of the experiential data continue to get out there here in 2018. Another element that we're looking at in terms of responding to greater health consumerism is greater convenience in terms of how people can access the services that we're offering. A number of things happening in this space. Certainly telehealth is one of those. We're starting to see telehealth services popping up. But maybe a little more fundamental one is the ability to book an appointment online and pick an actual time from a schedule. And again, we've talked for a long time, this should be, the healthcare experience, booking an appointment, things like that. Why can't that be very much like booking an airline flight or something like that, something else that we are sort of very used to doing online? We're starting to see here really an uptake in the last year of a larger number of organizations doing this. Some of this is through tools like ZocDoc or InQuicker. Some of this is from the EMR vendors, where Epic has made some big steps forward in terms of providing these kinds of capabilities for the organizations that they work with. But once you have the tools, then there's a lot of operational things that need to happen in order to actually make that work. And so that combination of operational and technology solutions is finally coming together to the point where we anticipate seeing some pretty significant growth in the number of organizations allowing actual appointment booking, not just appointment requests, online here in 2018.
So thinking about that transparency element of physician ratings and reviews, we've got some data here from our last industry survey that we ran back at the very end of 2016, asking organizations if they already have physician rating and reviews in place, or if they were planning to by the end of 2018. And you can see some of the data from that survey here and kind of where we were at in the curve at that point in time, end of 2016, and the prediction into 2018 being that there was going to be quite a wave of folks adding that. We have some early data from the survey that we're running right now pulled together. So this is very preliminary and just kind of giving us an indication where things are headed. We're going to do some more crunching on the data. But what we're seeing in those early numbers is that healthcare organizations really have gotten there. And I think that mirrors the push that we've seen with a lot of organizations at least dipping their toe in the water around ratings and reviews, whether they've got it on a subset of physicians or starting to look more closely at a piece of that, but a lot of effort has been put into that. And out of the folks, again, this is very early data from our survey that's still ongoing, but out of the folks that are doing work with physician ratings and reviews, the majority there see that this is a very important piece of their digital marketing effort, something that's really going to help them lead them towards success there. So something that it's interesting to see those numbers, I think, actually play out as people were kind of predicting. That really did become something that they were going to put effort and focus behind during that time, and kind of seeing where this is headed now.
And while there's certainly been a lot of pushes to engage consumers, to encourage this kind of consumerism behavior as a way to bring down costs and to maybe improve care, things like that. The other place where we're seeing this consumerism push is really in the competitive space. And we're seeing new competitors entering our market who are very savvy retailers. CVS is already the largest primary care provider in the United States through their urgent care clinics. And now we look at the CVS merger with Aetna really bringing some interesting changes and opportunities, right? You've got this walk-in, typically very quick to be seen kind of model that urgent care brings into the mix. When the merger was announced, there was a lot of discussion in the media around, will Aetna people have to get their medications from CVS? And to a certain extent, the answer to that almost certainly is yes. But I think from a much more interesting perspective is, will Aetna members have to go to CVS in order to get some of their primary care needs met? So as you look at urgent care, maybe some telemedicine, the retail elements of these things like that, there's an opportunity that the Aetna-CVS merger may start to change the way some people engage with the healthcare system at a much more fundamental level, in a way that I think is somewhat threatening to a lot of the business models of the organizations we work with and work for. So there's some very interesting new models there, and I think we're going to see some of the reality of that start to emerge here in 2018.
Just to build on that a bit, I think another trend we're seeing is that those local hospitals, those local healthcare organizations, increasingly you're facing competition from national level brands, whether that's the CVS type of urgent care experience, or whether that's some of the partnerships we're seeing with those sort of name brand national research organizations or larger specialty care organizations. There are new dynamics happening with the way that you have to kind of compete against these national level players, or that brand recognition that folks have from that high level right in your own backyard. So some interesting dynamics, I think, headed into the next year. So where are we headed as we think about trends and what's actually coming at us in 2018? We've got these broken down into three kind of categories of trends. That would be a lot around new ways to be found, and we'll talk about what that means. We're going to talk about branded conversations and a number of different pathways that those conversations are happening, and where we expect those to go in the year ahead. Going to dig into some of the UX and user experience areas, the details that people will be focusing on in the year ahead. There's always some kind of emphasis going on with user experience. It's always something we can improve on. There's a couple of things we want to look at that are particularly going to be important in 2018. And then to wrap it up, we're going to talk about some ways to maybe work smarter. You come out of a lot of these seminars or webinars and have all these ideas coming at you for things that you should be focusing on in the coming year. Obviously, something's got to give. You can't just add more and more to your plate. And so we're going to talk about maybe some approaches and ways to think about tackling some of these new areas.
So as we think about new ways to be found, it's really building on that idea that the search landscape is changing dramatically. We still have a lot of the core places that search happens, and those are going to continue to be out there. Nothing that is happening here is replacing that so much as adding more different places where search happens and more different avenues on how search happens, and to some extent changes what the rating criteria are for us as we try to get things listed in different ways. Last year we talked about how Google and the other search engines were moving from being sort of card catalogs for the internet to being answer engines. And one of the reasons for that is this move to voice search. Amazon sold a tremendous number of Alexa-enabled devices last year. That's going to continue, and we're seeing more and more different entrants into that market as well. So, whereas by the end of 2017, about 11 or 12% of households had some sort of smart speaker device in the home. Over the next couple of years, that penetration is going to get up near 50% of homes. So huge momentum in this space. That said, I think there's a lot of challenges still with individuals knowing, like, what am I going to do with this thing once I have it? For the number of these things that are out there, the primary usage for a lot of it continues to be as sort of an internet connected radio in many, many ways. However, when we look at the smart speakers, when we look at the digital assistants on phones and on computers, and when we just look at the numbers, we're seeing voice search become a bigger and bigger piece of the overall mix. So as we start to look at some of the stats around that, today, I think it's about 20% of searches are voice-led. So by 2020, they're predicting 50% of searches to be voice-led. So over even just the next 2-3 years, that's a huge growth in the amount of search. Now, again, this isn't necessarily replacing the traditional search mechanisms, or the not so traditional, but the things that we've been doing, whether that's mobile search, whether that's desktop search. These are in addition to those kinds of searches. Search is used in interesting ways by different audiences. Teens use voice search very heavily. Even today, more than half of teens are using voice search on a daily basis. A smaller percentage of adults use voice search on a regular basis. The reasons people do it are well, there's a number of different reasons. Certainly, a number of people see this as faster than typing in their questions. And then many people are using this when it's difficult to type. So we have sort of this interesting demographic donut in terms of heavy use of voice search. We have younger users who are just internet connected and very early to adopt a lot of these new things as they come along in the teen and young adult audiences. We also have a senior audience which has never been that comfortable with typing on cell phones and things like that, small text, small targets for fingers, things like that. Suddenly voice search becomes an easier option for them as well. So interestingly, we're seeing uptake in a couple of very different places. Now, for all of the voice search activity that's going on, very few marketers have a real plan for how they're going to adapt to voice search. And again, it's still in the great scheme of things, pretty early in its technological life cycle. Maybe not so surprising that we haven't all figured out how we're going to tackle this or how we're going to adapt to this as we move forward. But because of the numbers, we do have to start thinking about it in some detail. Now, when we look at how people are using voice search, about a third of searches are for general information, about a quarter are personal assistant kinds of things. This is having Alexa order something for you or add something to your shopping list. There's kind of the entertainment element of this, again, digitally connected radios effectively. And then there's a chunk of search for local information. And it's really important to think about the use cases for which voice search is being used more heavily. Because very often when we think about other kinds of searches, we're looking at, okay, how do we put certain kinds of information out there? The use cases for voice are a little bit different. So it may be more about making sure that people can find local resources more effectively. So location-based elements may become very important as part of your voice search strategy. Or depending who you are, you may have some general information opportunities. The number of players in this market, of course, is expanding. We all know Alexa. Siri is one that I think most of us are familiar with. Microsoft's entrance into this space is Cortana. If you have a Windows 10 computer, it shipped with Cortana, although we're not seeing huge use of that search on desktop. Microsoft phones also have that, although they've been a pretty niche player in the space. Google has Google Assistant as its entrance into this, again, on Android phones, but they are also shipping devices now that have this. Samsung is coming up with its own entrant in the space called Bixby. We don't know a ton about that at this point, but that's their entrant into this. And then this space, again, continues to grow and evolve. Siri is now shipping in the next couple of weeks on a new Apple device that's going to be a smart speaker. So that, Apple's getting into that space as well. Facebook has indicated that it's getting into this space as well. So we're going to continue to see more and more of these things growing out there. We also see some weird hybrids. I saw an ad the other day for a Motorola Android phone where there's a physical hardware piece you can connect to the back that adds Alexa functionality. It already has Google Assistant. I'm not quite sure why someone would go down that road. But again, it's becoming a space that's very competitive, and we're seeing a lot of new entrants, a lot of different ways that organizations are trying to get into this side of things. Now, one of the things that is sort of an important way to think about this as we look at how we're going to respond is in just understanding where the data is coming from, right? So when we look at Siri, Siri is primarily using Google for search results, and that hasn't always been the case, but that is where that data is coming from now. However, it actually uses Bing today for image-related searches. And so it's using a hybrid of those things. Google Assistant, not surprisingly, gets all of its information from Google. Cortana, likewise, as a Microsoft product, is getting all of its data from Bing. Alexa is an interesting one, right? Right now, it's getting its search results from Bing, but it also has a category of results that it considers popular results. So this is when you ask, what's the best pizza near me? It's actually going to Yelp for some of that information. So again, as we look at kind of this mix of pieces, a lot of our organizations have been exclusively focused on Google in terms of SEO and some of those elements of things, making sure our listings are correct, things like that. Unfortunately, I think we now need to think about Bing search, not necessarily for desktop and for mobile, but it is a pretty significant player in terms of voice search results. Likewise, when we've been very focused on telling our own story in terms of quality and experience through our websites, we may have to start developing some strategies for Yelp in order to cultivate ratings and things like that there, because it is a factor in some of these search results there as well. So we had a big internal discussion. Is voice search more a trend for this year, or is it still kind of a hype element? And it really falls somewhere in between. I think getting too focused on voice search is probably not the most productive way to invest your SEO dollars. However, there are some things that are good core SEO activity that will help you in the voice search as realm as well. One of those is featured snippets. So one of the ways that Google has become an answer engine is in the response for a number of its queries, you get what's called the featured snippet. So this is sort of that top block. It's trying to answer the question directly. And most voice answers, something we think about 65%, are coming from the text-only featured snippet text. So when Google or when Alexa or something like that is answering a question, most of the time we believe this is where it's getting that information. So now we're going to start to look at more and more competition to try to be that featured snippet. In the past, there have been times where we've looked at being a top 5 result or being on the front page, things like that. Now for voice search anyway, there is a distinct advantage to being the #1 answer because it's not going to typically present a list of possible answers to that query at that point. And again, that's core SEO kinds of work. The other thing that I think is really critical is making sure your local listings are correct. Lots of voice-related searches, particularly on mobile devices, but also on these smart speakers, are using kind of near me kinds of items, or closest to me, best near me, things like that. And so making sure that all of the search engines, or at least Google, Bing, Yelp, correctly know where your locations are, those sorts of things, really important to making sure that when they have those location-based search elements, that it's sort of properly relating you to the person who's asking that question. And then, as we mentioned, there is perhaps a new need to start thinking about how you're developing some of your Yelp and other sort of review site sort of reputation components. And so that may be an element that we have to start looking at in a little bit more detail as we go forward as well. So a couple of things sort of as good core SEO elements that we think become really important as you're addressing both voice search and other kinds of findability questions are the use of structured data. And again, this is putting some microdata within many of your pages to help the search engines understand exactly what it is they're seeing. And then a new concept called entity authority that we haven't talked about a lot, and I'll explain here in just a moment. But we'll start with a little bit on structured data. So Google, you have to realize, and the other search engines aren't just indexing pages anymore. They're really creating a map of entities, right? So these are people, places, things, actions, in a way that it needs to understand how organizations are put together. And this is a little different from the way that it used to just index pages out there, and provide some new challenges for Google and for us as website providers who are trying to make sure that what Google gets from us is functionally accurate. So the source of microdata, the standard of microdata that is used most commonly is called schema. There's a lot to schema, and it gets very technical very fast. But just understand that it helps us tell the story of the relationship between all of these different pieces, right? We can talk about a hospital, and a hospital is a place, and here's where it is, and here's the hours and things like that. We can explain that this person is a physician, and this is their specialty, and this is the location where they are, and those sorts of things. Schema is the way that we are able to, in a structured manner, deliver that information to the search engines. in the absence of this, the search engines are scraping through pages, trying their best to figure out this kind of set of relationships. And maybe not surprisingly, it's very, very difficult for them to do accurately every time. So the more we can spoon feed that information through, the better off we are. We do that through this microdata, through schema.org. This other concept is maybe a little new way to think about authority out there, right? Certainly, one of the major components of search engine results has been this question of what is, how reliable is the information, the source of the information out there. In the early days, a lot of this was being done through inbound links, right? This was Google's big innovation. Was they said, well, we can tell based on how many people have external links to this thing. That tells us a lot about how important this particular piece of information is, or the organization that's providing it, how authoritative they are. There are other elements to it. In those early days, having a .edu domain, for instance, was like gold. Huge boost from Google for having those kinds of things. Less so today. As we think about that kind of idea of authority today, Google is starting to think about that in a much, much broader way. And we think about it in ways that maybe are more aligned with the way we see the real world. Certainly, as we are thinking about these kinds of elements, the inbound linking strategy, for instance, if you're looking for the best pizza place in town, you're not going to have a lot of inbound links to the pizza website, right? It's a lot of the things that we're looking for don't have that kind of signaling available. However, Google does know from the Android phone in your pocket that you go into the pizza place twice a week and you spend a lot of time there. It may know from your search behavior, and then because maybe you're using Google Chrome, how people are interacting with that website or Google Analytics. It has a tremendous amount of data about how you're actually interacting with the digital presence for that organization, as well as the physical presence for that organization. All of that data together gives it a broader sense of how important, how authoritative this organization is for the particular information that you're putting out there. And so we're looking at things like engagement. Are people able to actually transact with us online? When we send emails, are people opening them? Are people using our brand specifically when they're doing searches on maps or on search engines, things like that? All of those different elements are going to play into just how authoritative your organization is. And so there's this broader concept of the way that you engage online and offline with consumers that is going to play a role in how you end up ultimately ranking for many of these different components. Healthcare organizations are already marketing themselves across a broad range of channels. You already have a big brand footprint in the communities you serve. So that's going to help you from these perspectives. But we are going to start looking at engagement metrics in a wide variety of ways, and looking at that as more and more important factors in how we actually get ranked for some of these things from a search engine perspective.
Yeah, lots of interesting shifts there as what the search engines are dealing with becomes much more of a real world scenario. I like that Yelp example of that driving the voice search, where you're asking not just what's the most relevant thing to restaurants in a town, but what's the best one, and how can a search engine answer that question for a user? It's going to take a lot of information that they have access to. The next kind of theme that we're going to tackle here is around branded conversations. And this is going to go a couple of different directions. And again, pulling in some of the things that we're hearing out there in the industry as trends, and you're probably hearing from folks as this is the hot new thing for 2018. And we'll kind of walk through a few of those and talk through some of the direction that we see things going and some of the fundamentals that are really driving these conversations that we're having with our audiences, with consumers, with patients, and where those are headed. One of the stats that is kind of impressive here, thinking about messaging apps and using particular apps for messaging. So things like WhatsApp, Messenger, WeChat, things like Facebook's Messenger, the new Direct from Instagram, as that's splitting out into its own separate app. Twitter and some of these other platforms that have direct messaging built into that. Lots of different directions to go. The number of users that have access to and are using messaging apps has started to exceed those big social networking sites. And so this is a big opportunity to engage with people through that type of conversation that we don't necessarily have. And I think we're all seeing, as Facebook is starting to make some changes to their newsfeed and what shows up there. Overwhelmingly, marketers are reporting that they're having harder and harder time getting noticed organically through social media, whether that's Facebook or Twitter or wherever they're putting their time. So we're looking at new ways to use the platforms that people are actually engaged with to communicate with them and have those conversations and have meaningful interactions. So when we think about using messaging for marketing, where are we at in this whole curve? According to a recent survey from Buffer, about 80% of organizations that they're talking to have not used messaging apps for marketing at all. So I think certainly in healthcare, we'd probably be far beyond that. But I think we're starting to see that very early adopter end of the curve where folks are just starting to think about how do we use messaging for marketing. There's a large number of chatbots out there, tens of thousands or some estimates of the number of different bots that are out there. A lot of those, maybe don't have a lot of value for the end user, and there's a lot of experimenting going on. So we're really still in that early adopter phase. It's something that we're starting to figure out, but we've been there for a little while. And so I want to talk through what we think about, when we're thinking about these chatbot or these messaging experiences. One of them that I like to look at is Starbucks. This is kind of what we have in our heads when we think about working with a chatbot. This is their app that they've been beta testing for, it seems like a little over a year now. It's still out there in beta, doing this natural language type of ordering and getting your drink ready to go right through the app through this very conversational transaction. So this is what immediately pops to mind when we think about, chatbots and using them for business, maybe doing these actual transactions through chat. Another direction that our minds tend to go is thinking in healthcare. A lot of the assumptions are, oh, this is kind of a diagnostic conversation, triaging the patient, guiding them to the right resources, an informational kind of conversation. So another direction that some of this technology is headed right now. There's some other interesting uses out there. So this is a chat or messaging application from UNICEF that's deployed in a number of different countries in different ways, and it can gather information from a population in an area very quickly. In this case, it's being used to gather information about how aware people are of healthcare services that are available and how much access they may have to those services. So it provides a really quick way to get in front of a large audience and get some information about what's going on in an area. So some things that might be really useful to healthcare providers in the US. You think about the flu outbreak that's going on, and how do you communicate about that? How do you get information to and from your community about things like that? Really effective way to do that through chat. What I think is really interesting, and maybe is kind of a signpost here around chatbots, is the launch of Chatbase, which is a Google incubator company that just went public in November, had a public launch of their tool that does analytics for chat platforms. And one of the things that I like to watch for is if there's new technology, new things, and new approaches going on out there, when the analytics start to show up and marketers can really dig into the data and see what's going on with those efforts, that's a lot of times where you see things start to really pick up. When we've got better numbers and better proof that our actions are having an impact, you can really make that case that this is where we should be investing time, and we're actually moving the needle on things. So kind of an interesting development there that maybe helps us see where we're at in what Gartner calls the hype cycle. And this is what we see a lot of times with these trends and new technologies. I think looking at chatbots as it keeps coming up and the discussion keeps happening, there was a huge influx of that back towards the end of 2016. I don't think we heard a whole lot about it last year, although we were starting to hear some sessions at conferences talking about it specifically in healthcare. I think we've kind of gone from that inflated expectations all the way through some disillusionment of what's really possible within the platform and how to make that happen. And I think in the next year or more, we'll be really climbing that slope of enlightenment and figuring out what are the most useful places to use some of these chat and messaging technologies in order to engage our audiences and provide services. Looking more, outside of maybe the hype to what is right in front of us today, we're really seeing that marketing automation and website personalization are two of the tools that we have right in front of us today that we know are out there and a lot of us are engaging with and trying to be more effective at. And so this is really where we see the focus for 2018 is really wrestling with these tools and figuring out how to make them work for us. What we're seeing, again, these are some really early results from that survey that we're running right now. Really encourage everybody who's listening to participate in that survey and get a copy of those results. It really can help guide some of your efforts over the next couple of years even. But what we're seeing right now in these early numbers is one of the areas that folks really feel that they're underperforming compared to their competition is in email marketing and marketing automation. This was the biggest area so far that people are indicating that they don't feel like they're beating out the competition in terms of their effort there. So really think there's some awareness around that and some intent to focus on that in the year ahead. Similarly, these really early numbers, we asked around being able to demonstrate that things are working for you and around website personalization. We found some interesting things and thinking about that trough of disillusionment, we might be there around website personalization. There's a lot of folks trying that out there, but a lot of people here reporting that they're not sure they can actually demonstrate that it is moving the needle for them. So again, I don't think that means anybody's abandoning personalization as a strategy, but it really begs the question: are we doing the right things, and are we able to really prove our efforts around personalization, around marketing automation, and some of these different areas that we're spending time? We're really trying to figure out, I think, as healthcare marketers, what is the best use of this? How can we be really effective at this and growing our learnings and ability to execute on those strategies? Whatever the delivery method, whether it's chatbots, whether it's through messaging apps or in email marketing automation and through website personalization, the expectation from consumers, and going back to that healthcare consumerism trend and that context that we're working within, personalized experiences are really where things are headed. We can always see from other retail and consumer experiences out there, things are getting more and more personalized all the time. And so we're trying to step up to that bar. The way to get there is really all about understanding the patient journey. And this hasn't changed. And that's what I think is really interesting about a number of the trends that we're seeing is the foundation really has to be there, and it hasn't changed all that quickly. It's really important to understand what the path is that a patient is taking or a consumer is taking as they're learning and choosing and deciding what they're going to do with their healthcare, really understanding each of those steps, and then having the content to go along with that. And that's not a simple thing. It's you've got to plan for not only understanding what that pathway is, but what are all the pieces of content that line up with that? How do they need to be structured so they can be delivered throughout all of those different touch points along that journey? And how do we actually make sure that they get published and kept up to date on all of those processes? So from that standpoint, it's really coming back to some fundamentals and thinking through that patient journey, how your content and your processes line up with that to get you ready not only for the future messaging, but to keep things up to date as well.
And more broadly, I think this leads us into the thinking that there's going to be a renewed focus on user experience here in the coming year. And two elements of that we particularly wanted to focus on. The first is accessibility. And accessibility is just the idea that your web properties should be usable by everyone. And there's a number of reasons why people may have difficulty working with your sites. And so, if people have optical challenges, if they have audio challenges, if they have cognitive challenges, a lot of these things make it just requires some special thinking about how you're putting your sites together, and thinking about how some people who may have some of these challenges may be accessing the site in different ways than you would ordinarily be doing that. This is something that kind of really started to hit the radar in 2016. It's always been something that has applied to healthcare organizations, and we've sort of known that. But there have been some reasons why it hasn't necessarily been on the front burner. There's a few things this year that have where the standards are aligning themselves here, starting about a week ago, when it became effective, where a couple of the different standards that had some important differences between them kind of came together. So now there's a more clear bar that organizations should be reaching for in terms of achieving accessibility for their sites. In addition to that, last year, there's a component of the Accountable Care Act that called 1557 that very clearly laid out the fact that this is something that applies to healthcare organizations, where again, it was sort of always clear, but this made it much more so. Also, I think it's important to recognize there were some lawsuits last year that also came into play. So accessibility is now something that definitely applies, and definitely is something that we need to be thinking about here in the coming year. If we think about the business case for this, if you're not accessible, in addition to the potential legal risk, you're just isolating a section of your patient population, and frankly, there's quite a bit of overlap between heavier healthcare users and people who may have some of these challenges, and so certainly there's some risk there to not being accessible. Likewise, the accessibility community really embraces organizations that are doing this well. And so we have found a great deal of loyalty across a lot of consumer brands where where organizations have really reached out to the community and made sure that they're doing this kind of thing well. And many of the things that we do for accessibility also have a positive usability impact for all users, have SEO implications, some other things that are all positive as well.
Another aspect of user experience it's nothing new, just like accessibility, it's something that we've been focused on for a very long time, but is really, for a variety of reasons, reaching kind of a critical point in the year ahead is the mobile user experience. And this is something that as we've gone through the shift from desktop-oriented sites towards responsive sites, and as we're really going through the second and third generations of those sites, thinking mobile first as we do those designs, has been a focus for a lot of organizations, but there are certainly some out there that are still kind of lagging behind in thinking through that online experience from mobile devices, and so it can be a real challenge to tackle that within an existing site, and to make sure that you're planning for those experiences as you grow and update the site. Some things that can really help you to keep the focus there as we move into the next year. I wanted to call back to, this is way back in 2015. This was a technique Facebook used as they were trying to build their awareness, as they were trying to reach out into outside of the US into other countries where the internet experience is not what it is here, and certainly I'm sure not what it is inside of Facebook's offices. Every Tuesday they would actually slow down their internet connection. It was called 2G Tuesday. They're trying to replicate the experience that folks in these countries that they were trying to reach out to would be having on their mobile devices, and as they were trying to interact with Facebook's products. And so a lot of times we get separated from what the experience is of the end user when we're sitting at our desks and trying to get things done. I would encourage you to figure out ways to incorporate the mobile devices into the day-to-day, and reach for that device, try to accomplish those tasks on the mobile device. Encourage folks inside your office to do the same thing, and really understand how important that mobile experience is is to users, being aware of the stats for your particular site of how many people are coming in from mobile devices, and certainly if you look at the traffic sources for those as well, how much of that traffic you're actually paying for and putting effort behind getting that is coming in on those mobile devices, how effective is that experience for people? We have a number of different tools that can help with that. One of them was just updated, which really highlights the importance into 2018 of this mobile experience. So Google has updated their PageSpeed Insights tool. This is a great tool that's been around for a while to help understand how fast your site is loading and what's holding it up. There's a lot of technical level details inside of these reports. But what's really important to know is that they've updated this tool. They're using data from actual Chrome browser experiences to give you a sense of the time that it takes for a site to load on mobile and on desktop, and giving you some insight into maybe why that is. This is all tied into some shifts that are going on within Google. One is the shift that we've talked about for a while towards a mobile first index. That's really underway and is continuing to roll out. They've been rolling that out over time. They've also announced that in July of this year, PageSpeed is going to become a ranking factor for mobile searches. And so they don't say that it's necessarily the only, it's definitely not the only ranking factor. There's a number of things. If your site is the absolute best content for that search, you're still going to show up there. But given a couple of good options, Google is going to provide the one that is going to give the user the best, fastest mobile experience in that scenario. So it's going to be a continued focus for organizations headed into this year, with Google really continuing to push behind that overall experience. Also wanted to, as we're talking about some Google things here, if you're not aware, they're also rolling out some interesting updates to their Search Console product, which ties back to what we're talking about with structured data and overall experience of your site through search. Some great updates to the Search Console, along with now 16 months of search analytics data showing up in there. So if you really get into what people are searching for and where they're ending up on your site, there's some great things going on there. The other tool that I'd recommend you check out for trying to identify issues with the mobile site is really digging into just your basic web analytics. You can segment and filter things down so that you're looking at those mobile visitors and looking at some of the different device breakdowns, looking for some of these symptoms that are out there around poor mobile user experience. You might see higher bounce rates. Take that with a grain of salt, compare that to some of the desktop rates. What you may be seeing is people coming onto the site, finding the answer they were looking for, going back to the next task that they had in mind. That's totally okay. You may also see people coming onto a page not thinking that it's relevant to their query and exiting the site from there because they were not able to find the information they needed. So it takes a little bit of sleuthing to figure out which scenario you may have going on, but that's certainly something to look at in combination with that average time on page to see how much time people are spending there. I would also look through some of the user flow tools within analytics and look for some of these lifelines, as I call them. So things like the contact us form, site search, bouncing back and forth from the search engines to the site. Those are indications that people are trying to find some information and aren't able to get to what they are looking for. And so that can indicate that maybe the navigation isn't as clear on mobile as it needs to be. Maybe links are buried towards the bottom of the page and people aren't scrolling as far as they need to. Gives you a lot to think about and to really influence the redesign of that mobile experience and maybe give it some additional thought or rearrange some elements. As you're thinking through that, some things to keep in mind: simplifying the navigation and menus is pretty important. Making sure phone numbers and other actionable information is clickable and integrated with the different apps on mobile in order to actually be able to use native mapping apps or the click to call functionality. Simple and clear instructions work really well within that tiny screen space that we have to work with, and making sure the calls to action are above the fold and are visible there when the site loads on that device. That helps people to understand what is the action they can take. If they read that content, they can come back to that action and move forward. So maybe take a look through your web analytics, figure out what are the pages that you have on your site that have the highest mobile traffic, and do some testing and some looking at those. So to kind of wrap things up here, we wanted to talk about working smarter. And we've got a lot of different things going on this year. There's a lot of these new trends coming in. One of the things we're definitely hearing in this survey is healthcare marketers really feel like nothing ever leaves your plate. There's just stuff piled on. And so we want to talk a bit about how you can take things off that pile. How do you really get balance out those new ideas that are coming in with the work that already exists and other things that other people think are important for you to be working on in the coming year. So got three different ways to think about this. The first is something that we're seeing around aligning some efforts. And as you probably gathered from what Ben was talking through especially, and thinking about entity search and the way that the search is evolving, thinking about your digital advertising efforts around PPC and your search advertising, and then thinking about all that content that you're creating to support those things, those efforts really need to be aligned. And what we see happening occasionally is some misalignment where, the focus for SEO efforts and the paid keywords are overlapping, and different people are conflicting with the efforts that are going on in different parts of the organization. And there may not be the content effort there to support what's going on at all. And so when you have that misalignment, there's a lot of wasted time and effort. Better to focus in on a particular area, really get tightly aligned and kind of move piece by piece through that to make sure that all of those things are happening in parallel. So the second thing to think about here is really around that shift as we're thinking towards digital, thinking about some of these new technologies and new opportunities that are out there. This may sound, pretty much out there in the clouds, but letting go of some of those broad efforts to focus on more narrow efforts. A lot of times, we're thinking about that, maybe that big billboard that's out there that doing some brand awareness. That's very visible, very easy to focus on that, and really hard to let go of doing that in order to do a much more narrow, targeted, focused campaign around a particular service offering through some of that marketing automation, through some of the search engine optimization or PPC campaigns. It seems much smaller, it's not as visible, but when you're really setting the bar around the results that you're tracking on those efforts, you really need to be kind of ruthless about what that bar is and be able to cut things down and say, this is where we need to focus because it's actually driving our key metrics, and we can really prove that even though it's not something you're going to drive by every day, it's moving the bottom line. The last area to think about is making a conscious effort, knowing that there are always new things happening. That's why a lot of us work in the digital space. We love all those new things that are going on, but we also get frustrated because there's just not the time in the day to maybe think through everything that's coming down the road. You have to really understand that things are going to be happening in digital. Things are going to be shifting. Google's going to shake everything up tomorrow. Facebook's going to switch up how they're doing things, and we need to be able to react to that. So plan the time to keep up with what's going on in the industry. Plan the time also, budget for a little extra space to learn those new tools and to understand how you can be really effective with some of those new opportunities that are out there as you're taking advantage of some of these trends. The only way to go faster, really, a lot of times is to slow down, create that space, and really focus on innovation. So with that, I think we're going to open it up for questions here in the time remaining. It looks like we're up against our hour, but we're going to stick around for just a little bit here for anybody that has time and answer a few questions. And first question here is we've got a question around what are some opportunities to use artificial intelligence in healthcare marketing? And I think that's something that we're hearing a lot about. Some of the technologies and tools that are coming up and being used in a variety of industries. AI is one of those things that's really fueling a lot of the chatbot advancements, but also things like marketing automation and personalization have that under the covers. And I think what the big trend here is we're looking for those tools and those techniques that are going to allow us to kind of scale a lot of that personalization. And AI is really one of those. Where the promise of it, at least, is that you can take a lot of the effort that you're putting in and continue to grow that and scale that. Some of the initial passes at working with chatbots or doing some of the personalization may not be as scalable as the hope for AI is right now. Ben, do you have anything to kind of add in there?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. So it's really going to be about testing effectiveness, and it's going to be around scaling some of these things up. So, you know, a lot of these chatbots are using some of this technology under the covers. As we start to look at chatbots, marketing automation, all of those kinds of things as scaling factors for applications like uh, uh, public health and you know, wellness kinds of things, population health. Like AI is going to be one of the things that helps us make those kinds of tool sets more effective. But um, I think there's lots of uses of AI in other areas of healthcare. In marketing, it's probably not going to be the most extensive of those, but I think there are some interesting possibilities there.
Well, we've got a couple of questions around getting a copy of the slides and recordings and things like that. It usually takes us about 24 hours to process the recording, get the slides posted up, and you'll receive an email around that with links and all of that.
Yeah, this is Cole again. Apologies, everybody, I know we're kind of running over a little bit here. So if you do have more questions, and I see a few more coming in right now, be sure to throw those into there's a section in the survey after the webinar for additional comments or questions. So throw your questions in there, and we will have David or Ben follow up with you one-on-one. And like David said, we will be posting the recording of the presentation today, as well as the slides, within about 24 hours on geonetric.com. We'll send an email out to everybody with that as well. Just wanted to take one more minute to kind of quickly plug our healthcare digital marketing trends survey again. If you haven't taken that, you can go to geonetric.com/take-survey. And I don't think we mentioned this before, but anybody that takes the survey does get a $10 Starbucks card. So well worth your time there. And again, be sure to register for next month's webinar, where David's going to be back and he's going to be talking about WordPress survival skills. So thanks everybody for your time. Sorry we ran a little late, and we will see you in February.